For 6 months straight, Elena Reyes brought breakfast to an old man every single day. A deli meat sandwich, an apple, a thermos of black coffee kept hot, 6 in the morning, never late, at the same bus stop on Clark Street, where he slept through the night on a sheet of cardboard. She was 27, a young woman, working 2 jobs at once just to scrape together enough money to pay rent on a miserable little apartment. He was 71, white, homeless, and all day long he told strange stories that nobody believed. Then, one morning, everything changed. 3 sleek black SUVs rolled to a stop in front of her apartment building just as the sky was beginning to pale with dawn. Men in black suits stepped out. One of them moved toward the door, tall, his features sharp and severe as if carved from stone. His eyes dark as deep pits holding secrets ordinary people would never want to know. Elena had just finished a night shift at the hospital. She opened the door in a wrinkled nurse's uniform, her curly hair tied back in a hurried knot, her eyes hollowed by lack of sleep. Her heart seemed to drop into an abyss when she saw these unfamiliar men. A poor girl from the South Side had never seen vehicles like that parked in front of her home. The man in front looked at her without blinking, his voice low and cold as steel. "Miss Reyes, we need to talk about Harold Whitmore." Elena felt her knees start to tremble. "Harry? The old man at the bus stop? Is he all right? Did something happen to him?" The man did not answer right away. His face showed nothing. But in those dark eyes, Elena caught a glimpse of something. Not coldness, pain, buried very deep, but still there. "He is gone," the man said, "and you are in danger." Elena gripped the doorframe to keep herself from falling. The world seemed to spin around her. Harry, the gentle old man with the sad smile and eyes that were strangely bright for someone living on the street. The old man who always accepted the sandwich from her hands with the reverence of someone receiving a priceless gift. The old man who told her stories about secret missions, about flights that carried senators to places that did not exist on any map. She had always thought he was just a lonely old man with a vivid imagination. She was wrong, completely wrong. But who was he? Who killed him? Elena asked, her voice shaking but without tears. She had learned not to cry a long time ago. Life did not grant her that luxury. "That is why I am here," the man said. "My name is Dominic Corsetti. 18 years ago, Harold Whitmore saved my life. I have been searching for him ever since. I found him 3 days ago, living like someone discarded on the street." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I came to bring him home. I was too late." Elena looked at the man named Dominic. She did not know who he was, did not know why he had appeared here, did not know why someone who seemed so powerful would care about a homeless old man. But she felt one thing. The pain in his eyes was real. The respect when he spoke of Harry was real. "Why am I in danger?" Elena asked. Dominic met her gaze. "Because Harry left everything to you." "Everything?" Elena did not understand. He was homeless. He slept on cardboard and covered himself with a worn old wool blanket. He had nothing at all. Dominic pulled a thick envelope from inside his suit jacket and handed it to Elena. She opened it. Inside were legal documents, numbers, signatures. Her eyes widened as she read each line. No, it can't be. Harry can't be this man. She looked up at Dominic, her mouth open, no words coming. $4.7 million, Dominic said, his voice not shifting at all. "A mansion in Lake Forest, and enough secrets to get you killed. If this story touches your heart, please press like to support the channel. Share the video with the people who need to hear this story. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next stories." Elena stared at the numbers in the documents, trying to make her mind accept what she had just been handed. $4.7 million. She could not even picture what that kind of money looked like. She had been fighting to stretch $73 across 2 weeks, and now someone was telling her that the old man she brought a sandwich to every morning had left her a vast fortune. "Who are you?" Elena asked, her voice edged with caution. "Why do you care about this?" Dominic Corsetti stood there, tall and overwhelming inside her cramped 300-square-foot apartment. He looked like a creature from another world, his expensive suit in absolute contrast to the peeling walls and the battered old sofa Elena had bought from a thrift store for $20. "I am the head of the Corsetti family," Dominic said bluntly, without any detour. Elena felt the blood in her body turn to ice. The Corsetti family. Anyone who lived in Chicago knew that name. The Mafia, organized crime, newspaper stories about bloody purges, about an underground empire that controlled half the city. She stepped back, her spine meeting the wall. "Get out of my house," Elena said, her voice trembling but firm. "I do not know what you want, but I have nothing to do with your world." "Miss Reyes," Dominic said, his tone unusually patient. "I understand you are afraid, but you need to listen to me. 18 years ago. I was 18. My father had just been assassinated. The men who killed him hunted me all night through the alleys of the South Side. I was shot, bleeding without stopping, and I ran into an abandoned warehouse. I thought I would die there." Dominic paused, his dark eyes seeming to look toward a place very far away. Then a man appeared. He did not ask me who I was. He did not ask why I was hurt. He simply bandaged my wounds, hid me from the men chasing me, and vanished before dawn. He left only one sentence behind. "Live, boy. You still have a debt to pay to this world." "That man was Harry," Elena whispered. "Yes, and I searched for him for 18 years, to repay that debt." Dominic looked at her. "I found him 3 days ago, living like a beggar on the street. I intended to bring him home, to give him everything he deserved to receive, but I was too late." Elena wanted to believe him. Some part of her wanted to believe that someone in this world truly cared about Harry the way she did. But she had lived too long in a world where trust was the rarest luxury. "I do not need your protection," she said. "I do not want to be involved with the Mafia. Leave." Dominic opened his mouth to say something. But in that very instant, the apartment window exploded. Glass sprayed everywhere like a deadly rain of crystal. 3 dark figures surged in through the shattered frame, faces covered, guns in their hands. Everything happened in less than a second. Dominic moved like a machine running on pre-written code. He shoved Elena down behind the battered sofa, his body shielding her completely. In the same seamless motion, his right hand drew a pistol from a holster hidden beneath his suit jacket, and 2 shots cracked out one after the other. Precise, cold, not a single wasted movement. 2 gunmen dropped to the floor before they could even squeeze the trigger. The third swung his weapon toward Dominic. But at that exact moment, the back door flew open. A tall man charged in like a storm, kicked the gun out of the attacker's hand, then locked his arm around the man's neck in a practiced hold. The attacker struggled for a few seconds, then went limp. Dominic rose, the gun still in his hand, his eyes sweeping the room as he assessed the situation. But the first thing he did was not to check the enemy. He turned back to Elena lying behind the sofa, her face drained, her hands shaking. "Are you hurt?" Dominic asked, his voice still calm as if what had just happened were nothing more than a small inconvenience. Elena shook her head, unable to speak. She looked at the 2 bodies on the floor of her apartment, blood spreading across the cheap rug she had bought at a garage sale. Her world, a world of 14-hour shifts and peanut butter sandwiches, had just been ripped open in front of her. "Who are you people?" Elena finally managed, her voice rough. "What the hell are you?" Dominic looked at her, then down at the attackers on the floor. "The people keeping you alive," he said. The man stepped forward, hauling up the 3rd gunman who was unconscious. He looked at Dominic with a cold, professional expression. "Boss, one of them is still alive." Dominic walked to the wounded gunman groaning on the floor, blood spilling from his shoulder where the bullet had passed through. He crouched down, staring straight into the attacker's eyes with the gaze of a predator. "Good. He will tell us everything." 2 hours after the attack, Elena sat in a strange room in a place she did not know. A safe house, Dominic called it. A gated mansion on the north side of the city, far from the familiar streets of the south side, far from the miserable apartment that had now become a crime scene. The room they brought her into was 3 times the size of her apartment, with a king-size bed, silk sheets, and a bathroom with a tub larger than her entire kitchen. Elena sat in an armchair by the window, both hands wrapped tight around a cup of hot tea someone had given her. She did not drink it. She only needed the feeling of warmth spreading through her palms, something real to hold on to in the middle of this nightmare. She still saw it every time she closed her eyes, blood on the floor, the crack of gunfire, the way Dominic shot 2 men dead right in front of her without hesitation. She had witnessed death before, in the hospital, where it came slowly and was wrapped in the solemnity of medicine, but death in her apartment had been different. It came fast, violent, and ruthless. The door opened. Dominic stepped in with the man whose name she now knew was Marcus Miller, the right hand of the Mafia Boss. Elena did not stand. She did not greet them. She only watched them with the wary eyes of an animal cornered. She had learned that way of looking during her years in the foster care system, when trust had meant injury. "We have news," Dominic said, pulling up a chair and sitting across from her. Elena realized he was keeping his distance on purpose, not coming too close, as if he understood she needed space. Marcus opened a laptop and set it on the table. "I just got the autopsy results for Mr. Whitmore," Marcus said, his voice even, as if he were giving the weather report. "The official cause is listed as heart failure, but the blood work shows something else." Elena felt cold slide along her spine. What? Thallium, Marcus said. A poison with no smell, no taste. The level in his blood shows he was being poisoned for weeks, maybe months. Each dose small, not enough to kill right away, but building over time. Elena set the cup down because her hands had begun to shake uncontrollably. Weeks. Someone had been poisoning Harry for weeks, while she brought him a sandwich every morning, while she sat and talked with him about her dreams and her fears, while she believed he was just a lonely old man who needed a little kindness. Someone had been killing him right in front of her, and she had not known. Who? Elena asked, her voice rough. Who did this? Dominic and Marcus exchanged a look. The gunman we captured talked, Marcus said. He was hired through a middleman. The one who paid was a white man in an expensive suit. He said the old man should have been dead a long time ago. Derek Whitmore, Dominic said the name as if it were a curse. Harry's own grandson, 34. A gambling addict. Buried in debt. 3 years ago, he used forged papers to take Harry's company, claimed Harry had dementia, and pushed him out onto the street. Elena remembered that day in July. The luxury car, the man in the expensive suit, and the ruthless eyes. You should have been dead already, old man. She had seen him. She had been there when he threatened Harry, and she had done nothing except tell him to leave. What does he want? Elena asked. Money, Dominic said. Harry had assets Derek did not know about. Secret accounts. Real estate held under shell companies. While Harry was alive and there was no will, Derek was the only legal heir, but now Harry has left everything to you. Derek loses it all, and he will not accept that. Elena understood. She had not only inherited Harry's property, she had inherited his enemies too. Is there more? Elena asked. She had a sense the answer would not be anything good. Marcus looked at Dominic as if asking permission. Dominic nodded. Derek owes money to Viktor Volkov, Marcus said. The Russian Mafia, one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in Chicago, and also the greatest enemy of the Corsetti family. Elena closed her eyes. She had thought her life was already complicated enough with 2 jobs and a pile of unpaid bills. Now she was sitting in the middle of a mafia war she had never wanted to be part of. We need more information, Dominic said, standing. And I know how to get it. He put back on the suit jacket he had taken off earlier, fastening the buttons slowly. Elena watched him, and for a moment she saw something behind that cold mask. Determination. And maybe danger too. What are you going to do? She asked, even though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Dominic paused at the door, then turned his head to look at her. You stay here. This part, you do not need to witness. The underground bunker beneath Dominic's nightclub lay 3 levels deep below the earth, where music could not penetrate and screams could not escape. The concrete walls were a full yard thick, built back in the Prohibition era, and they had witnessed countless interrogations like this one. Joey Martinez sat strapped tight to a metal chair in the middle of the bare room. His face was swollen, one eye almost too puffed to open, dried blood crusted on his split lips. He was the only gunman to survive the attack on Elena's apartment, and now he was paying for that luck. The steel door swung open. Dominic walked in, his stride slow and controlled. He removed his expensive suit jacket, folded it carefully, and set it on an old wooden table. Then he rolled his shirt sleeves up to his elbows, revealing solid forearms marked by a few faint scars. Marcus stood guard by the door, expressionless as a statue. Dominic pulled up another chair, set it directly across from Joey, and sat down with the ease of someone settling in for an intimate conversation. But his eyes were different, cold, dark, without a shred of mercy. Name, Dominic said, not a question but an order. Joey stayed silent, jaw clenched in desperate resistance. Dominic did not look annoyed. He stood, walked to the wooden table where several tools had been laid out in advance. His hand picked up a nail puller, turning it beneath the pale yellow light. I will ask again, Dominic said, his tone as even as if he were discussing the weather. After that, I will start with your fingernails. Joey stared at the tool, then at Dominic's eyes. He had been in this life long enough to know when someone was bluffing and when they were telling the truth. The man in front of him was not bluffing. Martinez, Joey Martinez. His voice came out hoarse. Who hired you? I do not know his name. Joey swallowed, his eyes still fixed on the tool. White guy, expensive suit. Said it was just a scare job. Nobody had to get hurt. Lie, Dominic said. He stepped in, his left hand closing around Joey's right hand and yanking it forward. The nail puller in Dominic's right hand opened, clamped onto the thumbnail. I swear, Joey yelled, panicked. He paid through a middleman. But his voice shook, breaking under fear. He did mention something. Said the old man should have been dead a long time ago. Dominic froze, the tool still clamped on Joey's nail. The old man should have been dead a long time ago. Derek Whitmore had said those words to Harry the day he came to the bus stop to threaten him. Elena had heard it. What else? Dominic asked. Joey clung to the question like a lifeline and spilled everything he knew. That guy owes the Russians. Viktor Volkov. He owes a lot of money. Heard he had to do something to pay it back, or Volkov would kill him. Dominic released Joey's hand and straightened. Viktor Volkov. The name sat in his chest like a heavy stone. 5 years ago, Dominic and Viktor had been partners. At that time, Dominic had no idea that Viktor was the shadow behind his father's assassination. They shared territory, shared profits, built an alliance everyone thought could never be broken. Until Dominic discovered Viktor had started trafficking people, women, children, things that even in the criminal world Dominic would never touch. He walked away. Viktor swore he would kill him for that betrayal. And now Derek Whitmore owed Viktor money. Everything was beginning to make sense. Investigate the connection between Derek and Viktor, Dominic ordered Marcus. I want to know how they have been in contact, for how long, and what they are planning. Marcus nodded and slipped out in silence. Dominic turned back to Joey, who was still trembling in the metal chair. He stepped closer, bent down until their faces were only inches apart. The woman in that apartment, Dominic said, his voice low and dangerous, like the growl of an animal. If I ever see you near her again, I will not use pliers. I will use my bare hands. Joey nodded wildly, eyes wide with terror. Dominic straightened, put his suit jacket back on, and fastened the buttons as if he had just finished an ordinary business meeting. He walked out of the room without looking back. In the car, Dominic took out his phone and dialed a familiar number. I need everything you have on Viktor Volkov, and I need it tonight. While Dominic was following the clues through the darkness, Elena sat alone in the unfamiliar room at the safe house, her eyes fixed on the window, though her mind was far away. She thought about Harry, about bitter cold winter mornings, about the first sandwich, about the way it had all begun, 6 months ago, when her life had not yet been swept into this mad storm. It was March, and Chicago was still cold enough to cut into skin and bone. Elena remembered clearly the first morning she saw him. She had been standing there waiting for the number 22 bus on Clark Street, 6 in the morning, when it was still dark and the wind off Lake Michigan blew as if it meant to tear through her thin coat. The bus stop sat right beside a laundromat that had been closed for a long time, its storefront coated in dust and graffiti. And there, on the sidewalk, an old man lay curled on a flattened piece of cardboard, covered with a frayed, torn wool blanket. The first time she saw him, Elena turned her face away. She told herself she could not afford to help anyone. She could barely afford to keep herself alive. Every month was a fight for survival against overdue bills and an empty refrigerator. Helping someone else was a luxury she simply could not afford. 2 weeks passed like that. Every morning Elena stood waiting for the bus, and every morning she pretended she did not see the old man lying less than 10 steps away. She looked at her phone, looked down at the ground, looked up at Chicago's dull gray sky. She looked anywhere except at him, but no matter how hard she tried, his eyes haunted her. Not the desperate, begging eyes she imagined a homeless man would have. Bright eyes, alert, observant, as if he could see straight through her, see the scars she kept hidden beneath her coat and her strained smile. The morning that changed everything came on a day near the end of March. Elena had made a deli meat sandwich for lunch, but when she looked at her work schedule, she realized her shift would last 14 hours. She would not have time to eat. The sandwich would spoil in her locker. She stood at the bus stop, the sandwich in her bag, and looked toward the old man. He was awake, sitting with his back against the old brick wall, the wool blanket wrapped around his shoulders. And this time, Elena did not turn away. Her feet moved toward him on their own, as if an invisible cord had tugged her back. "Excuse me, sir." Elena stopped in front of him, timidly holding out the sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "I made an extra one. Would you like it?" The old man looked at her, sharp blue eyes sweeping over her face as if he were reading a book. Then he looked down at the sandwich and looked back at her. "You need it more than I do, young lady," he said, his voice rough but clear, carrying something Elena could not quite name. Dignity. That was what she saw in him. A dignity that did not waver even as he sat on a freezing sidewalk with all his possessions reduced to an old blanket and a trash bag full of belongings. "That is debatable." Elena almost smiled, "But I am offering it to you." He studied her for a long moment, then held out both hands to accept the sandwich as if it were something precious. "Thank you, Elena." She stood there, frozen. He had just spoken her name. She had never introduced herself. She had never spoken to him before. How did he know her name? Elena was about to ask, but the old man continued, as if the fact that he knew her name were the most ordinary thing in the world. My name is Harold Whitmore, but you can call me Harry. She nodded, still confused. But there was something about him that made her not want to interrogate him. Maybe it was the warmth hidden beneath the weathered exterior. Maybe it was the way he looked at her as if she mattered, not as if she were just a poor woman trying to make it through the day. She nearly turned away, nearly went back to her old routine of not seeing him, not caring, not letting herself get involved. But something made her stop. Maybe it was the way he said thank you, with genuine gratitude, not desperation. Do you drink your coffee black or with sugar? Elena asked. Harry looked up, and his eyes flashed with a strange light, as if she had just spoken some kind of password correctly. Black is fine, girl. Elena nodded, then turned away as the bus arrived. She did not know that simple question would be the beginning of 6 months that would change her life forever. From that morning on, everything became a routine Elena could not imagine living without. 6 in the morning every day, never late, never missing a single one. A deli meat sandwich, an apple, a thermos of black coffee kept hot. She woke up 30 minutes earlier than she used to, just to prepare those things. And every morning, when she reached the bus stop on Clark Street, Harry was already awake and waiting for her. Not waiting for food, waiting for her. They talked for about 10 to 15 minutes each morning before the bus arrived. Brief conversations, yet somehow they became the brightest point in Elena's day. Harry told her strange stories she did not know whether to believe. Back when I was in the agency, he would say, staring off into empty space as he spoke, we carried out missions in places that did not exist on any map, getting people out of countries we officially were never in. Other times, he told her about flying senators by helicopter to secret locations even the president did not know about long nights in the jungles of countries he could not name, doing things he could not speak of. Elena listened. She did not believe it, not truly, but she did not argue either. She thought Harry was simply a lonely old man with a vivid imagination, someone who needed another human being to listen to his stories whether they were real or not, and she was willing to be that person. What surprised Elena was that Harry asked about her, too, about her nursing classes at the community college, even though she could only go 2 evenings a week when she could afford it, about her job at the hospital, about the patients she cared for, about her dream of one day becoming a real nurse. He asked about her present and her future, but he never asked about her past. Not once did Harry ask where her family was, why she lived alone, or why sometimes her eyes would darken as if she were seeing ghosts from another life. He knew. Somehow, he knew there were wounds that should not be touched, and he respected that. One April morning, when she handed him the sandwich as usual, Harry looked at her with a strange expression. Do you know the difference between charity and humanity, Elena? She shook her head. Charity is giving away what you can spare, Harry said, his voice low and thoughtful. Humanity is giving away what you can't. You do not give me a sandwich, Elena. You give me your humanity. Elena did not know what to say. She only felt her chest tighten and her eyes burn. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Then came that morning in May. Elena was walking from the corner toward the bus stop when she saw a man in an expensive suit pass by Harry. Instead of walking past like everyone else, the man stopped and looked down at the old man sitting on his piece of cardboard with disgust. Then he kicked Harry's old wool blanket down into the filthy gutter. Hey, Elena shouted, her feet running toward them before her brain could even process what was happening. What the hell are you doing? The man did not even bother to turn around to look at her. He is blocking the way. That is a human being. Elena yelled at his back, her voice shaking with rage. That is someone's grandfather, someone's father, someone's friend. He kept walking, without a single word in reply. Elena wanted to chase him, wanted to grab him by the collar and force him to apologize, but she knew it would do no good. Instead, she knelt beside Harry and helped him pull the wet blanket up out of the gutter. It was soaked through and reeked of sewage water. Harry sat in silence, his hands trembling as he folded the wet blanket and laid it across his lap. You did not have to do that, he said softly. Yes, I did, Elena answered without hesitation. Harry looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a sad smile, but warm, as if he had just seen something precious. You have fire in you, Elena. That is good. He nodded slowly, his blue eyes deep as if he were looking straight through the future. You are going to need it. Elena did not understand what Harry meant then. She thought he was only offering random comfort, the way an old man might. Now, Sitting in a strange room inside the safe house of a mafia boss, with her life threatened by people she had never met, Elena finally understood. Harry had known. Somehow. He had known everything. The memory of those months was still sharp and vivid in Elena's mind. In May, Chicago began to warm, but her life only grew colder. Her 300-square-foot apartment on the south side was a small portrait of poverty. An electric bill 3 months past due lay stacked on top of a water bill 2 months overdue. Collection letters from the hospital for an emergency visit 2 years earlier still arrived like clockwork every week. Rent was 6 weeks late, and the landlord had taped an eviction notice to her door. Elena stood with the refrigerator wide open, staring into the near-total emptiness. 2 eggs, half a tub of yogurt that had expired last week, a few wilted leaves of greens she should have thrown away a long time ago. She had just been paid $420 from both jobs combined. Subtract rent, subtract the installment she had to give the landlord so he would not throw her out on the street, subtract bus fare for the next 2 weeks. That left $73 for 14 days. About $5 a day for everything. Food, toiletries, any expense that might come up. Elena closed the refrigerator, resting her forehead against the icy metal door. Her stomach had been empty since lunch the day before, but she had learned how to ignore hunger. It was just another kind of silence she could endure if she tried hard enough. On the kitchen table, a loaf of bread and a jar of mayonnaise sat waiting, enough to make sandwiches for Harry for another week, maybe 2 if she stretched it. She could stop. She could keep the bread for herself, use the money for coffee, to pay down the electric bill before they shut the power off. Harry would understand. He would probably tell her to stop if he knew how bad things truly were for her. But the thought of walking past that bus stop, seeing Harry sitting there, and not stopping, she could not do it. Because she knew what it felt like to be abandoned. Elena closed her eyes, and a memory from 11 years earlier crashed over her like a wave. She was 16, having just run away from the foster home where her foster father had done things to her she could not put into words for 4 years. She wandered the streets of Chicago with a torn backpack and not a cent to her name. 3 days without food. She curled up in a dark alley, thinking about giving up on everything. Then a woman passed by. She did not say a word. She only stopped, placed a granola bar into Elena's hand, and walked on. No pity, no judgment. Just one simple act of kindness. That granola bar saved Elena. Not physically, though it was the first thing she had eaten in 3 days. Spiritually, it reminded her that kindness still existed, that she was not completely invisible, that someone had seen her. Harry reminded her of that every day. The next day at the hospital, Rosa Martinez, the 60-year-old Mexican head cook with eyes sharp as knives, saw Elena wiping tables during the lunch shift without eating anything. "Have you eaten anything today, Mija?" Rosa asked, her arms folded across her chest. "I ate breakfast," Elena lied. Rosa studied her for a long moment, then disappeared into the kitchen. 5 minutes later she came back with a box of chicken and beans. She pressed it into Elena's hands. "Eat. Right now." "I can't." "You can, and you will." Rosa cut her off, her voice strict but her eyes gentle. "You want to save the whole world, Mija? You can't do it on an empty stomach." Then she added, softer, "That old man is a human being. I understand. But you know what? You are a human being too." Elena looked down at the food, her throat tightening. That night, back in her empty apartment with the pile of unpaid bills, Elena still stood in the kitchen making a sandwich for Harry, because it was the only thing in her life that made sense. 2 months after that evening, when Elena stood in her empty kitchen making sandwiches with $73 in her pocket, something happened that should have made her realize there was something not normal about him. But at the time, she did not understand. She did not want to understand. It was July, and Chicago lay under the heavy, airless heat that belongs to summer. Elena was walking from the corner toward the bus stop as she did every morning, a paper bag in her hand with the sandwich and the thermos of coffee, when she saw the car. A sleek black Mercedes was parked right beside the bus stop, where Harry sat on his familiar piece of cardboard. That car cost more than her entire apartment, maybe more than the whole building she lived in, and the man who stepped out of it looked like he owned the world. 35, maybe a little older, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit, hair combed neatly into place, polished leather shoes that probably cost as much as Elena made in a month, but his eyes were cold. Cold and ruthless in a way that made Elena stop 10 meters away. The survival instinct sharpened by years of hardship putting her on alert. The man walked up to Harry, looming over the old man like a threatening tower. "You should have been dead already, old man." His voice cut through the morning air, cold and full of malice. Elena stood there, her heart pounding, not knowing what to do. She wanted to step in, but there was something in the air, a dangerous tension, that pinned her feet to the ground. Harry lifted his head to look at the man. And what shocked Elena was not fear on his face, it was the complete absence of it. Harry's blue eyes, always warm and gentle whenever he spoke with her, were now ice cold. That was not the gaze of a weak, homeless old man. It was the gaze of someone who had seen hell and walked back out. "I know what you did, Derek," Harry said, his voice low and steady, like steel scraping against steel. "I know about the forged documents, the offshore accounts, the lies you told the board of directors. The man named Derek, Harry's grandson Elena, would learn later, flinched and stepped back as if he had been slapped. His face shifted for a moment before he forced his confidence back into place. You do not have proof. You have nothing. You are just a crazy old man living on the street, and nobody believes you." Derek stepped in closer and grabbed the torn collar of Harry's shirt. Elena could not stand it anymore. She ran toward them, her voice sharp in the quiet morning. "Let him go." Derek turned, his cold eyes sweeping Elena from head to toe with undisguised contempt. A young woman in a cheap nurse's uniform, holding a brown paper bag. He looked at her as if she were an annoying insect. "None of your business, girl," he snarled. "He is my friend," Elena said, her voice trembling, but she did not back down. "Let him go, or I will call the police." Derek stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing whether she was even worth the trouble. Then he released Harry and adjusted the collar of his suit with disgust. He leaned down and whispered something into Harry's ear that Elena could not hear. Then he turned his back, walked to the Mercedes, and drove away without looking back. Elena rushed to Harry and dropped to her knees beside him. "Are you okay? Who is he?" Harry stayed silent for a long time, his eyes following the car until it disappeared around the corner. Then he looked at Elena, and in that moment she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Fear. Not fear for himself, fear for her. Harry reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, wrinkled business card, handing it to Elena. "If anything happens to me," he said, his voice low and urgent, "go to this address. Tell them Harry Whitmore sent you. Tell them the Winter Soldier has come home." Elena held the card, confused. "You are scaring me, Harry." Harry looked at her and took her hand in his old hands, still surprisingly strong. "And Elena," he said, "do not trust anyone who offers to help too easily." Elena did not understand what Harry was saying. She thought he was panicking after the confrontation with Derek. She did not know he was warning her about the future, about the black SUVs that would park in front of her building, about the man named Dominic Corsetti who would appear with an offer of protection, about everything that was about to happen. Elena jolted awake from the current of memory when the door opened. Dominic stepped in, Marcus right behind him, the two of them carrying an old cardboard box. "What time is it?" Elena asked, realizing the world beyond the window had turned pitch black. "Almost midnight," Dominic replied. "You have been sitting here for hours." Elena had not realized time could move that fast. She had sunk too deep into memories of Harry, of winter mornings, of the first sandwich, and the final warning. "We found this in a hidden safe at Harry's old house in Lake Forest," Dominic said, setting the box on the table in front of Elena. "You should see it." Elena looked at the box with hesitation. Inside were files, photographs, documents yellowed by time. She began turning through them one by one. Most of it was paperwork tied to Harry's work, missions redacted with thick black bars, reports in a coded language she did not understand. Then she saw it, a dark brown folder, the corners worn and torn, with two initials handwritten on the cover, E.R. Elena Reyes. Her hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were photographs, photos of her, dozens of them, taken from a distance over the years. Her at 18, standing in line at the social services office. Her at 20, wearing a fast food uniform. Her at 23, walking out through the gates of the community college. Her at 26, waiting for the bus on Clark Street, at the very stop where she met Harry. There were her addresses year by year, every apartment she had ever rented, every job she had ever worked, her work schedule at the hospital, the bus route she took every day, the times she arrived at the stop, and the times she left. All of it recorded with care in the trembling but legible handwriting of an old man. "What?" Elena whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "What is this?" Dominic sat down across from her, his voice gentler than Elena had ever heard it. "Turn the next page." Elena did, and she saw a sticky note attached to the first page of the file, Harry's handwriting so familiar it hurt. "Daughter of Maria Reyes. My debt. Maria Reyes, her mother, the woman who had died along with Elena's father in a car accident when Elena was only 8, the woman whose face Elena could barely remember, reduced now to blurred fragments of lavender scent and lullabies in Spanish. Dominic continued, as if he were reading her thoughts. I had my people investigate. 30 years ago, Harry carried out a covert mission in Mexico. The details are still classified, but I found enough. Maria Reyes, your mother, was a local interpreter. She helped Harry on that mission, hid him from the men hunting him, provided critical intelligence. Elena felt the world tilt under her feet. The mission succeeded, Dominic went on, but someone betrayed them. Maria's location was exposed. The people Harry was fighting came for her. Harry did not get there in time to warn her. Maria and her husband, your father, were killed. Officially, it was a car accident, but it was not. Elena closed her eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. For 19 years, she had believed her parents died in a tragic random accident. It turned out they had been murdered. And Harry, the old man she brought a sandwich to every morning, was the one who had indirectly caused their deaths. Harry searched for you for years, Dominic said. After Derek forced him onto the street, he spent every remaining day watching you from a distance. He knew everything about you, Elena. Where you lived, where you worked, which bus route you took. He chose that bus stop for a reason. Elena opened her eyes and stared at the photographs spread across the table. He waited for me, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. He knew I took that route. He chose to sleep there so he could meet me. Yes, Dominic nodded. He waited. Every day, every night, in bitter cold and burning heat, until you stopped. Elena remembered the first morning, when Harry spoke her name before she had introduced herself. She had wondered then, but she had let it go. Now she understood. He had known her name all along. He had known everything. He did not need my sandwiches, Elena said, her voice breaking. He was watching me, protecting me, trying to repay what he did to my mother. And he left everything to you, Dominic said, not because you were kind to him, but because you were the reason he held on through the last years of his life. Elena looked down at the sticky note with Harry's words. Daughter of Maria Reyes. My debt. She was no longer a random poor girl who had inherited money from a homeless old man. She was the end point of a 30-year journey, the redemption of a man who had lived with guilt for half his life. Harry did not just leave you money, Dominic said, standing. He left you a mission. What mission? Elena asked, but Dominic had already turned toward the door. You will know soon enough. First, I need more information. You stay here. Do not leave this room for any reason. Then he disappeared into the night with Marcus, leaving Elena alone with the files of her own life and thousands of questions with no answers. 2 a.m, the loop of Chicago lay in silence. The skyscrapers stood like sleeping giants, their windows dark except for a few faint security lights. Derek Whitmore's office building sat at the corner of LaSalle and Monroe, a glass and steel tower of 20 floors called Whitmore Tower, built with money stolen from his own grandfather. Dominic stood in the alley across the street, dark eyes sweeping the building like a predator measuring prey. Beside him were Marcus and 2 other men, silent shadows with danger in their bones. Security cameras, Dominic asked, his voice low as wind. Handled, Marcus replied. Tony hacked the system. It is playing old footage. They will see nothing but empty hallways. Guards. 2. 1 in the main lobby, 1 patrolling the floors. Shift changes at 3. We have 45 minutes. Dominic nodded and pulled on black gloves. Go. They moved like ghosts, slipping through a back door Marcus had already unlocked with a compact electronic device. The fire stairs took them up to the 12th floor, where Derek Whitmore's private office sat at the end of the corridor. On the 11th floor, Dominic signaled them to stop. Footsteps sounded above. The patrolling guard was coming down, a flashlight cutting through the darkness. Dominic motioned the others into a blind corner, while he stepped into the middle of the hallway and waited. The guard appeared at the top of the stairs, a middle-aged man with a beer belly and the weary posture of someone working nights. He had barely opened his mouth to speak when Dominic moved. Fast as a blade, without a wasted sound, Dominic surged forward, his right hand delivering a precise punch to the guard's temple. The man dropped like a sack of sand, unconscious before he even hit the floor. Dominic caught him and lowered him gently so there would be no noise, then dragged him into the shadows. Marcus stepped in and checked the guard's pulse. Clean. No witnesses. They continued up to the 12th floor. Derek's office was protected by a high-end electronic lock, but with Marcus's device it opened within 30 seconds. The room was wide and luxurious, with a massive oak desk, imported leather chairs, and an abstract painting on the wall that was probably worth $1 million. Harry's money, Dominic thought, his jaw tightening. Marcus sat at Derek's computer, fingers moving fast over the keys. The password was laughably simple. He used his own birthday. The screen lit, and what they found was worse than Dominic had imagined. Emails between Derek and Victor Volkov, detailed down to every comma. A plan to kill Elena Reyes and pin it on Dominic Corsetti, giving Victor an excuse to start a war and seize territory. An invoice for thallium purchased from an illegal source in Eastern Europe, the very poison that had killed Harry slowly over months. And worst of all, a map. A detailed map of the safe house where Elena was staying, marked with entrances, camera positions, the guard patrol schedule. Information only an insider would know. Dominic felt the blood in his veins turn to ice. "Copy everything," he ordered Marcus, his voice cold as ice. But in that exact moment, red alarm lights flared throughout the building. Someone had triggered the backup security system. "We have company," Marcus said, drawing his gun. The fire door on the far side of the corridor slammed open, and 4 dark figures poured out with weapons in hand. Not building security, these were professional shooters, moving in tactical formation with the eyes of killers. Victor's men. Dominic knew at once. He had planted people here in advance. Gunfire erupted before anyone could say another word. Dominic flipped the massive oak desk onto its side as cover and yanked Marcus down just as a burst of bullets shredded the $1 million painting on the wall. In darkness lit only by muzzle flash, Dominic fired twice. 2 gunmen went down, precise and clean, the same way it had been in the interrogation of Joey Martinez. The third rushed in from the side, trying to close the distance for hand-to-hand. Dominic shifted, caught the man's wrist, and twisted hard. Bone cracked, dry and brutal. Then Dominic spun behind him, locked both hands around the attacker's head, and snapped. The gunman collapsed, his neck bent at an unnatural angle. Marcus finished the last one with 2 shots to the chest as he tried to run for the stairs. "Move," Dominic ordered. Not the main exit. They ran for the window. Dominic did not hesitate. He threw himself through the glass and landed on the roof of the neighboring building 3 meters away. Marcus and the other 2 followed, rolling as they hit to absorb the impact. They sprinted across rooftops, leaping the gaps between buildings, until they reached the car waiting in a dark alley. The vehicle tore into the night, vanishing into the maze of Chicago streets before the first police sirens could rise. Inside the car, Dominic opened the safe house map they had photographed from Derek's computer. He studied every detail, every handwritten note, every piece of information that only someone inside his organization should have known. "We have a mole," Dominic said, his voice cold and dangerous as a sharpened blade. "Who?" Marcus asked. Dominic did not answer. He only stared out the car window, his dark eyes turning heavy and storm black. When Dominic returned to the safe house at nearly 4 a.m, he found Elena still awake, sitting at the table with the files of her life spread across its surface. But she was no longer looking at the photographs or the investigative notes. In her hands was an old, pale yellow envelope, and a handwritten letter in Harry's trembling script. Dominic stopped in the doorway, realizing she was crying. Not sobbing, but quiet tears sliding down her cheeks. The kind of tears that belong to someone who has learned how to hurt in silence. She found the letter, Marcus murmured beside Dominic. It was in her file folder. Harry wrote it months ago, but he never sent it. Elena looked up at the sound of footsteps, her eyes red, yet her gaze strangely sharp. She held the letter out to Dominic without a word, as if she wanted him to understand what she had just read. Dominic took it, his eyes moving over the slanted lines on the page. "Dear Elena," Harry wrote, "I do not know whether you will ever read these words, but I need to write them, if only to set myself free. 30 years ago, I failed. I could not save your mother. Maria was the bravest woman I have ever met. She risked everything to help a stranger, and she paid with her life. I have carried that guilt with me every day since, but I have watched you grow up from a distance. I watched you endure the years in foster care, watched you survive on the streets at 16, watched you stand back up on your own when the whole world turned its back. Every time you chose kindness instead of bitterness, every time you gave even when you had nothing to give, I knew Maria's spirit still lived in you. I do not deserve the sandwiches you brought me every morning, but they were the most precious gift I have ever received, not because of the food, but because they proved I was not wrong to believe in you. Take this money, Elena, not for yourself, but for all the people the world has forgotten. People like me, people no one sees. You have the strength to do what I could not. Use it. Forever grateful to you, Harry." Dominic folded the letter and handed it back to Elena. He did not say anything, because there was nothing to say. For a long time, they sat in silence. Then Elena stood, wiping her tears with the back of her hand in a decisive motion, as if brushing away weakness. When she looked at Dominic, Something in her eyes had changed. No more fear, no more confusion, only resolve. "I do not want to hide anymore," Elena said. Her voice so steady Dominic almost did not recognize her as the same woman who had been shaking in her apartment days earlier. "What do you want?" Dominic asked. "I want to expose Derek. I want the whole world to know what he did to Harry. I want him to pay, but on my terms." Dominic lifted an eyebrow. "Your terms? We just found proof he hired men to kill you. Proof he poisoned Harry. Proof he conspired with Viktor Volkov. My way is faster. And more permanent." Elena understood what he meant. A bullet. A body. The problem solved the way the underworld solved everything. She shook her head. "Your way makes me no different from them. Harry left me a mission. You said that. That mission is not to become a killer, even if I am killing people who deserve to die. I want to use the law. I want to use the press. I want Derek to face real justice, the kind the whole world sees." Dominic studied her for a long moment. In his mind, part of him wanted to laugh at her innocence. The law, the press, those things did not work on men like Derek Whitmore, men with enough money to buy judges and silence reporters. But another part of him, a part he had thought dead for a long time, saw in Elena something he had lost. Integrity. The belief that there was a right way to do things, even when that way was harder. "You know that is far more dangerous, right?" Dominic asked. "If we go through the law, Derek will have time to strike back. Viktor will have time to prepare. You will become a public target." "I am already a target," Elena replied. "At least this way, my death will mean something." Dominic stood and walked to the window, looking out at the night sky beginning to pale into the gray of dawn. He thought about Harry, about the man who had saved his life 18 years ago, about the last words he had left behind. "Live, boy. You still have a debt to pay to this world." Maybe this was how he paid that debt. Not with blood, but by helping a good person do the right thing. "Harry was right about you," Dominic finally said, turning back to Elena. "You are a warrior, but you fight clean." The next morning, they sat around the large table in the safe house conference room. Documents and evidence gathered from Derek's office spread out in front of them. Elena had been awake all night, organizing everything into a systematic plan, dark circles under her eyes but her gaze burning with resolve. "Step 1, she said, setting a folder on the table. "We submit all of this evidence to the FBI. Emails between Derek and Viktor, the invoice for the poison, the assassination plan. This is enough to open a criminal investigation and arrest Derek." Dominic sat across from her, listening with an expression that gave nothing away. Marcus stood near the door, his eyes moving between the two of them like he was watching a chess match. "Step 2, Elena continued. "I will contact the press. Not to expose Derek, the FBI will do that, but to tell Harry's story, the story of a former agent who gave his whole life to his country, only to be thrown onto the street by his own grandson and poisoned to death. The story of how this society treats the people it forgets." "And step 3? Dominic asked, his tone neutral, but his dark eyes tracking every movement she made. "Step 3 is to establish a charity," Elena said. "The Harry Whitmore Foundation. For homeless veterans. I will use the money Harry left, not for myself, but for people like him. People the world has forgotten." She paused and looked Dominic straight in the eye. "And when I become a public figure, when my story is known to the whole world, Derek and Viktor will not be able to touch me anymore. Killing an unknown girl is easy. Killing the founder of a charity the whole country is watching is much harder." Dominic was silent for a long moment, his fingers tapping lightly against the tabletop. Finally, he nodded. "Fine, we do it your way. But I will provide security for you the entire time, not negotiable." Elena opened her mouth to argue, but then she realized it was the most reasonable compromise she was ever going to get from a mafia boss. Fine, they spent that entire day preparing. Elena drafted a message to the FBI, wrote an outline for the upcoming press conference, researched the procedures for setting up a non-profit foundation. Dominic sat nearby, supporting her when she needed it, but letting her make every decision herself. By late afternoon, when Elena went to rest for a few hours, Dominic called Marcus into his private room. "Contact Colonel James Patterson," Dominic ordered, his voice completely different from the one he used with Elena. Cold, sharp, the voice of the head of the Corsetti family. "Who is Patterson?" Marcus asked. "Harry's old teammate in the CIA. They ran missions together for more than 20 years. He is retired now, but he still has influence in the intelligence community. If we need a witness to confirm who Harry really was and what Derek did, Patterson is the most reliable one." Marcus nodded, making a note in his phone. Anything else? Put someone on Derek 24/7. I want to know where he goes, who he meets, even what time he takes a piss. And Victor? Keep your distance. Not yet. Dominic walked to the window, staring outside with eyes as deep as black water. Marcus watched his boss's back, hesitated, then asked in a low voice, "Why not tell her about Plan B?" Dominic did not turn around. "Because she needs to believe she can do this on her own, even though the truth is she can't. And if Plan A fails, then Plan B becomes my way." Dominic finally turned back, his eyes cold as steel, "and she will not have to witness it." Marcus understood. Plan B was not complicated. If the law failed, if the press was not enough, if Derek and Victor kept threatening Elena, Dominic would handle it the way he knew best. A bullet. A corpse. The problem solved. Elena would be safe, and she would never know what the real price of that safety had been. "Be careful, boss," Marcus said, his voice low and unusually serious. "She is changing you." Dominic did not answer. He only stood there, looking out the window, thinking about a young woman of 27 who had brought sandwiches to a homeless old man for 6 months, without needing a reason, without expecting repayment, thinking about how she looked at him not with fear or awe the way most people did when they looked at a mafia boss, but with something else, something he had not seen in anyone's eyes for a very, very long time. Trust. And the expectation that he could be better. Marcus was right. She was changing him. And Dominic did not know whether that was good or bad. The night before the press conference, Elena could not sleep. She lay on the bed in the luxurious room of the safe house, eyes fixed on the ceiling, her mind spinning with thousands of thoughts. Tomorrow she would stand before the press and tell Harry's story to the whole world. Tomorrow her life would change forever. Around 2 a.m, she decided to go downstairs to the kitchen for a glass of water. The safe house was silent as paper. Most of the security posted on the outer ring, only a few men stationed inside. She went barefoot across the wooden floor, trying not to make a sound. As she passed Marcus's office, she heard a voice, low, urgent, secretive. Elena stopped, the survival instinct honed by years of hard living pulling her into the shadows as she listened. "Yes, the girl will be at the press conference tomorrow." Marcus's voice carried through the door left slightly open. "I will make sure Dominic is distracted. He will never see it coming." Elena's heart seemed to stop. She stood there, feet nailed to the floor, unable to believe what she had just heard. Marcus, Dominic's right hand, the man who had saved her in the first attack, the mole, the traitor, the safe house map on Derek's computer. Information only someone on the inside could know. Now she understood. She eased back 1 step, then another, fighting to make no noise. Then she turned and ran. Down the hallway, down the stairs, toward the garage where the vehicles were parked. She did not think. She only acted on instinct. Run. Get out. Trust no one. Harry had warned her. Do not trust anyone who offers help too easily. She had not listened, and now she was paying for it. The keys to a black SUV hung on a board in the garage. Elena snatched them, jumped into the vehicle, and started the engine. The garage gate lifted and she shot into the Chicago night like a bullet. In the rearview mirror, she saw lights snap on at the safe house. They had discovered she was fleeing. She pressed the accelerator harder, the vehicle tearing through empty streets at a dizzying speed. Then she saw them. 3 black SUVs emerged from an alley, as if they had been waiting. Not Dominic's cars. She knew it instantly. Victor's people. They knew she would run. They had been warned. Gunfire ripped through the quiet night. The rear window shattered, glass exploding in every direction. Elena ducked low, hands locked on the steering wheel, driving like a madwoman through red light intersections, one-way streets, tight corners. Her heart hammered as if it wanted out of her chest. She was not a professional driver. She was only a nurse who rode the bus every day. But she had survived worse than this. She would not die tonight. Victor's vehicles closed in from both sides, pinning her in the middle. She saw a gun barrel thrust from the window of the SUV on the left, aimed straight at her. This is the end, she thought. Then a black truck surged out from a side street and slammed into Victor's SUV like it was a toy. Metal met metal with a horrifying crash, the SUV flipping and skidding across the pavement in a shower of sparks. Dominic. He was behind the wheel of the truck, his face ice cold under the streetlights. From another direction, another vehicle appeared, blocking the second SUV head-on. Marcus stepped out, gun in hand, firing again and again into the tires until it lost control and plowed into a lamppost. The third SUV tried to turn and flee, but Dominic's men had already closed in from every direction. A gunfight erupted in the middle of the Chicago night, the crack of bullets echoing between tall buildings. Elena stopped the SUV, hands shaking on the wheel, not knowing whether to keep running or stay. Her door was yanked open. Dominic stood there and pulled her out, using his body to shield her while the last bullets still tore through the air above them. When the shooting finally stopped, when Dominic's men had subdued the surviving gunmen, Elena turned to the man who had just saved her, and she punched him square in the face. "Your man betrayed you," Elena screamed, her eyes blazing with fury and fear. "Marcus. I heard him on the phone. He sold me out to Victor." Dominic did not flinch from the punch, did not show anger. He only looked at her with those dark eyes, calm in a way that made no sense. No, he did not betray anyone. Elena was about to scream again, but the sound of footsteps made her turn. Marcus walked up, his gun back in its holster, his face carrying none of the look of a traitor just exposed. "I did not betray anyone," Marcus said, his voice steady and sure. "But you need to hear the truth about Dominic." Elena stood in the middle of a Chicago street at night, surrounded by wrecked vehicles and subdued gunmen, staring at Marcus with eyes full of confusion and suspicion. She had heard him on the phone, selling her out to Victor. She was certain of it, yet here he was, saying it was not what she thought. "You need to hear the truth?" Elena asked, her voice still shaking with adrenaline and anger. "What truth? That I did not hear you telling Victor where I would be tomorrow?" Marcus exhaled and looked toward Dominic as if asking permission. Dominic stood a few steps away, silent, watching, saying nothing. At last, he gave a small nod. "You heard correctly," Marcus said, turning back to Elena. "I did speak to Victor's people. I did tell them where you would be tomorrow, but not because I betrayed Dominic or you, because I am working as a double agent." Elena blinked, trying to process it. A double agent? 6 months ago, when we learned Victor was planning to attack Dominic's territory, I volunteered to infiltrate his organization, Marcus explained. I pretended I was dissatisfied with Dominic, pretended I wanted to switch sides. Victor believed me because he thinks everyone can be bought. The call tonight was to make Victor believe I am still working for him, but the information I give is always controlled. We knew Victor would strike tonight. We were prepared. That is why Dominic showed up at the right moment to save you. Elena looked to Dominic, who still stood in the darkness, his face unreadable. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked, anger still there but relief creeping in around it. "Why let me think Marcus was a traitor and run like that?" "Because we did not know whether the safe house was bugged," Dominic finally said, "and because your reaction had to be real. If Victor was watching, he had to see you truly afraid, truly running. That made him believe Marcus's plan was working and order the attack immediately, instead of waiting until tomorrow when we would have been less prepared." Anger flared in Elena's chest. She had been used as bait without knowing it, but at the same time, she understood the logic behind it. If she had known in advance, her reaction would not have been natural, and Victor might have noticed. "There is one more thing you need to know," Marcus said, his voice dropping. "About Dominic. About why Victor wants him dead so badly." Elena looked at Marcus, then at Dominic. She saw Dominic stiffen slightly, as if this was something he did not want her to know. 5 years ago, Marcus continued, Dominic and Victor were partners. They shared territory, shared profits, built an alliance the strongest Chicago had ever seen. People thought they would rule this city forever. Elena watched Dominic, trying to picture him as the partner of someone like Victor Volkov, a man who had conspired with Derek to kill her, a man who had sent assassins after her again and again. "Then what happened?" she asked. "Victor started trafficking people," Marcus said, his voice turning cold. "Women, children, young girls kidnapped from Eastern Europe, sold into prostitution rings. Dominic found out and demanded Victor stop. Victor refused, said it was the biggest source of profit, and Dominic was too weak if he could not accept it." Elena's stomach twisted with disgust. Trafficking, children. She had known the underworld was cruel, but this was beyond anything she could imagine. "Dominic walked away," Marcus said. "He broke the alliance, gave up half his territory, and declared war on Victor. That war lasted 2 years, killed dozens on both sides. In the end, they reached an unofficial ceasefire. But Victor never forgot, never forgave. He swore he would destroy Dominic for that betrayal." Marcus looked straight into Elena's eyes. "Dominic has enemies because he has lines he will never cross. He is a criminal, yes. He has done terrible things, but there are things he will never touch, no matter how much money is offered. That is why I have stayed with him for 15 years. Elena was silent for a long moment, swallowing everything she had just heard. She looked at Dominic, still standing in the darkness, his face hiding emotion but his eyes not. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the waiting, as if he were bracing for her to turn her back the moment she truly understood what he was. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked Marcus. "Because I see the way he looks at you," Marcus replied, his voice softening. "I have worked with Dominic for 15 years. I have never seen him like this before. He needs someone to believe in him, not out of fear, not because of money or power, but truly believe." Dominic stepped out of the shadows and faced Elena. Only a few steps separated them, yet it felt like an abyss. "Now you know what I am," Dominic said, his voice low and steady. "A mafia boss, a killer, a criminal with limits, but still a criminal. Do you still want my help?" Elena held his gaze for a long moment. She thought of Harry, of the stories he told about people who did bad things for good reasons. She thought of herself, of the years in foster care when she had done things she was not proud of just to survive. She thought of this world, of how it was never simple, never only black and white. "I never wanted your help," Elena said, her voice steady and clear. "I want your partnership." The press conference was held at the Palmer House at 10 in the morning the next day, in a large room filled with dozens of reporters from the biggest Chicago outlets and even a few national television crews. News of the gunfight the night before had spread fast, and the story of a young woman inheriting nearly $5 million from a homeless old man had become a hot headline everywhere. Elena stood behind the podium in a simple black dress she had borrowed from someone, because she did not own anything formal enough for an occasion like this. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked out at a sea of cameras and microphones, but her voice held steady when she began to speak. "I am not here to talk about money," Elena said, her eyes sweeping the room. "I am here to tell you about a man named Harold Whitmore. You may have read in the papers that he was a former CIA officer, that he was once wealthy, that he left me a large fortune, but that is not the Harry I knew." She paused and drew a deep breath. "The Harry I knew was an old man who slept on a piece of cardboard at a bus stop on Clark Street. He covered himself with a frayed old wool blanket and carried everything he owned in a trash bag. Every morning he woke with a smile and a dignity most of us, those of us with roofs over our heads, never managed to keep." Elena spoke of winter mornings, of the first sandwich, of the stories Harry told that she did not believe, of the way he said thank you, as if a cheap loaf of bread were the most precious gift in the world. She spoke of the businessman who kicked his blanket into the gutter, of the contempt in passing faces, of how society treated people like Harry as if they did not exist. "Harry was not the only homeless person in this city," Elena said. "There are thousands like him, veterans who gave their lives to this country, only to be abandoned when they were no longer useful. Elderly people pushed onto the street by their own families, human beings with stories, dreams, whole lives, forgotten by the world. That is why I am establishing the Harry Whitmore Foundation. Not to honor the money he left behind, but to honor the man he was, and to help the people like him. The people the world has forgotten." The room fell silent. A few reporters wiped their eyes. Even the seasoned cameraman looked moved. Elena was about to finish when the press room doors flew open with a loud crash. Derek Whitmore burst in, eyes bloodshot, like a man who had not slept in days. Hair wild, suit jacket wrinkled, and in his hand was a gun. People screamed, surged for cover. Reporters spilled over chairs, cameramen ran. The security police drew their weapons, but Derek was faster. He aimed straight at Elena. "Nobody move," Derek screamed, his voice shrill as a man on the edge of collapse. "No one moves." Elena stood still. She did not run, did not duck behind the podium. She looked straight into Derek's eyes, into the frantic and desperate gaze of a man who had lost everything. "Derek," she said, her voice calm in a way that felt almost impossible. "He was supposed to leave everything to me," Derek screamed, tears starting to spill down his cheeks. "I am his blood. I am his grandson. You are just a stranger. Why did he leave it to you? Why?" "He is your blood," Elena replied, her voice not wavering even with the gun trained on her chest. "And you threw him away. You pushed him onto the street. You poisoned him. You killed the very man who gave you everything." "I had no choice," Derek shouted, the gun shaking in his hand. "I owed money. They threatened me. If I did not do something, they would kill me. So you chose to kill your grandfather instead of facing the consequences of your own life," Elena said. "You chose to put it all on an old man who could not defend himself." She paused, looking at Derek with something that was not quite hatred. Maybe pity, maybe understanding, maybe both. "I read the letter Harry left," Elena said, her voice softening. "Do you know what he wrote?" Derek stared at her, tears running freely now. the gun still pointed at her, but no longer steady. "He forgave you." Elena lied. She lied without blinking, without hesitation. In the letter, Harry did not mention Derek with forgiveness at all. But this was not the moment for truth. This was the moment for mercy. "He said he understood why you did it," Elena went on, her voice as gentle as if she were soothing a child. "He only wished you had asked for help instead of taking everything away." "He forgave me?" Derek whispered, eyes wide as if hearing something impossible. "After everything I did?" "He forgave you." The gun slipped from Derek's hand. He collapsed to the floor, sobbing like an abandoned child. And maybe, in some way, he truly was. The police rushed in moments later, cuffed Derek, and dragged him away amid the reporters' screams and the harsh blaze of camera flashes. Elena remained behind the podium, watching Derek's figure disappear through the doorway. She was not trembling anymore. She was not even afraid. In the back corner of the room, Dominic stood in the shadows, one hand resting on the gun hidden beneath his suit jacket. He had been ready to step in. He had been ready to shoot Derek if he had to, but he did not have to do anything, because she did not need him to save her. While Elena stood behind the podium facing Derek and his gun, Dominic was not in the press room the way she believed. He was on the roof of the building across from the Palmer house, where he had just confirmed what the instincts of a survivor had been whispering since early morning. Victor was not placing everything on Derek. He knew Derek was unreliable, too weak and too unstable to finish the job. So he had planted a backup plan. 3 sniper teams, each in a different position on buildings surrounding the hotel, all aimed at the large windows of the press room. If Derek failed, they would complete the work. Dominic spotted them while he surveyed the area from high ground before the press conference began. The brief glint of a sniper scope in the morning sunlight, only an instant, but it was enough for his eyes. Eyes trained to hunt danger since he was a teenager, to recognize it. He did not tell Elena. There was no time, and she needed to stay focused on the press conference. This was his responsibility. The first building was an old office block, about 100 meters from the hotel. Dominic climbed up by the rear fire escape, moving like a ghost in his black suit. The first sniper lay flat on the roof, eye locked to the scope, utterly focused on the target inside the hotel. He did not hear Dominic approach from behind. He did not have time to feel anything before powerful hands seized his head and twisted hard. The snap of a neck breaking sounded dry in the morning air, and then there was silence. The second sniper was on the next building, 1 story higher. Dominic had to jump the gap between rooftops, landing in a roll to keep the sound down. But this time the enemy was more alert. The sniper turned at the exact moment Dominic rose, and he was not holding a rifle. He held a combat knife, the steel flashing under the sun. They crashed into each other on the empty rooftop, not a word spoken. This was a language they both understood, the language of violence and survival. Dominic slipped a thrust aimed at his throat and answered with a punch to the attacker's jaw. The sniper staggered but did not fall, lunging back with a rapid series of strikes. They rolled over rough concrete, fists and boots, wrestling for control. Dominic caught the wrist that held the knife, but the man used his free hand to pull a smaller blade from his boot sheath and drove it straight into Dominic's shoulder. Pain tore through him like lightning. Dominic clenched his teeth, did not shout, did not let the pain slow his reflexes. He wrenched the attacker's knife hand, snapped the larger blade with a dry crack, then yanked the knife out of his own shoulder and plunged it back into the attacker's throat. Blood sprayed, hot and bright. The sniper struggled for a few seconds, then went still. Dominic rose, one hand pressing the bleeding wound in his shoulder. The third sniper. Where was he? Dominic looked toward the third building and saw a dark figure running. He had seen his partners go down and decided his life mattered more than the payout. Dominic drew his gun and ran after him. His feet flew across rooftops, leaping gaps between buildings, ignoring the pain spreading from his shoulder down his arm. The sniper was fast, but Dominic was faster. A single shot cracked. The sniper pitched forward, hands clamping his leg where the bullet had punched through his calf. Dominic walked up and stood over the man as he groaned on the ground. "Who sent you?" Dominic asked, his voice ice cold even as blood soaked into his suit jacket. The sniper looked up, face pale with pain and fear. "Volkov," he whispered. "Volkov sent us. He is coming tonight. He will kill that girl himself." Dominic said nothing else. He swung the butt of his gun into the sniper's head, knocking him unconscious. Then he straightened and stepped to the edge of the roof, looking down at the Palmer house below. He saw Elena being escorted out by police, safe, steady, her chin lifted like a warrior who had just won her own battle. She did not know about his battle. She did not know he had killed 2 men and disabled a third to keep her alive. The phone in Dominic's pocket vibrated. "Marcus. Boss. "Are you all right? I heard there were shots on the roof." "I am fine," Dominic said, looking down at the blood spreading across his shoulder. "Get the car ready. We have work to do tonight." He ended the call, looked at Elena one last time, then disappeared from the roof. She did not need to know what he had done. Some things were best kept in the dark. 3 hours after the press conference, Elena sat in an interrogation room at FBI Chicago headquarters, facing Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, a red-haired woman with eyes sharp as knives and the bearing of someone who had seen far too much ugliness in her life. Dominic stood in the corner of the room, his shoulder wrapped tight beneath a fresh suit jacket, still aching with every movement. He did not tell Elena about the wound, did not explain why he had changed clothes in the middle of everything. She did not ask. "We questioned Derek Whitmore," Agent Mitchell said, placing a thick folder on the table. "He is willing to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. And what he told us is why we had to call you in immediately." Elena looked at the folder, unease spreading through her chest. After everything that had happened, she had thought it was over with Derek. Clearly, it was not. "Derek provided information about Viktor Volkov," Agent Mitchell continued, "the Russian Mafia boss. We have been watching him for years, but we have never had enough evidence to arrest him. Now Derek is willing to testify, to tell us everything he knows about Viktor's operation, in exchange for serving 15 years instead of life." "That is good news," Elena said, but her voice remained cautious. "I am guessing there is bad news too?" Agent Mitchell nodded, her face turning more severe. "During the interview, Derek revealed Viktor has no intention of stopping. He is planning an attack tonight." Elena felt the blood in her body turn cold. "Tonight? But Derek has been arrested. The snipers were neutralized. What does Viktor still want?" "The target is not only you," Agent Mitchell said. "Viktor wants to destroy the Harry Whitmore Foundation before it can even be established. He wants to send a message to everyone." "What message?" Dominic spoke for the first time, his voice low and dangerous. "That anyone who stands beside Dominic Corsetti will die," Agent Mitchell replied, looking Dominic straight in the eye. "Viktor does not care about the money or the influence of Miss Reyes. He cares that you are protecting her. In Viktor's eyes, that is humiliation. You walked away from the alliance with him 5 years ago, and now you are protecting a stranger as if she matters more than anything. He will not let that pass." Elena looked at Dominic and realized for the first time that she was not being threatened only because of Harry's inheritance. She was being threatened because of Dominic, because he had chosen to protect her, because in Viktor's eyes, that made her a weakness to exploit. "Is there more?" Dominic asked, his voice not shifting even as Elena saw his jaw clench. Agent Mitchell hesitated before answering. "Derek also said he gave Viktor the location of the safe house." Elena surged to her feet, her heart lurching. "The safe house? Where we are staying? Viktor knows?" "He has known for 2 days," Agent Mitchell confirmed. "That is why the attack last night happened. Viktor knew which direction you would run. Derek says Viktor is gathering all his forces for tonight. He will hit the safe house with everything he has, not to kidnap you, to kill you and anyone standing next to you." Elena looked at Dominic. He stood there, his face carved from stone, but she could see the fire burning in his dark eyes. Not fear, determination. A cold, ruthless determination she had seen before, when he shot the attackers in her apartment, when he interrogated Joey Martinez in the bunker. "We can provide FBI protection," Agent Mitchell said. "Put you into witness protection until we catch Viktor." "No." Dominic cut in before Elena could answer. "Viktor will not stop just because the FBI is protecting her. He will wait. A month, a year, 10 years. He will wait until you get tired, until protection loosens, and then he will strike. The only way to end this is to end Viktor." "What are you going to do?" Agent Mitchell asked, her eyes narrowing. Dominic did not answer. He only looked at Elena for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the door. "I need to finish this tonight," he said without looking back. Elena stood, following him. "Not alone," she said, her voice steady and leaving no room for refusal. At 10 o'clock at night, the industrial district on the south side of Chicago lay drowned in darkness and silence. Abandoned warehouses stood like enormous ghosts on both sides of an empty road, the streetlights flickering weakly, not enough to push back the thick, clinging night. This was no man's land, a place even the police hesitated to enter after the sun went down. Dominic stood on the roof of a 3-story warehouse, infrared binoculars in his hand, watching the road leading into the area. His shoulder still throbbed from the stab wound that morning, but he had injected enough morphine to numb the pain without dulling his reflexes. This was not the first time he had fought while wounded. It would not be the last. Victor thinks he will hit the safe house and catch us off guard, Dominic said into the radio. He does not know we have moved, and he does not know we are waiting for him. Instead of running, Dominic had chosen a different tactic. He let false information leak that Elena would be moved through this industrial zone tonight, on the way to a new safe house. Victor, with the confidence of a man who believed he held every thread in his hands, swallowed the bait. 15 of Dominic's men were already in ambush at strategic points along the road. 3-pronged caltrops had been scattered across the pavement at 2 key choke points. A heavy truck waited in an alley, engine running, ready to surge out at any moment. It was a perfect trap, and Victor was driving straight into it. 5 black SUVs appeared at the far end of the road, headlights glaring, tearing open the dark. About 20 men, maybe more. Dominic counted through the binoculars. This was Victor's main strike force, the sharpest shooters money could buy. They had come for one purpose: kill Elena. "Wait," Dominic said into the radio, his voice calm, as if he were directing a training exercise. "Let the first vehicle come deeper." The lead SUV of Victor's convoy rolled into the kill zone, tires hitting the caltrops hidden across the black road. Tires blew in rapid succession like fireworks, the vehicle losing control, fishtailing before slamming into a lamppost. "Now," Dominic ordered. The heavy truck roared out of the alley like a raging bull, smashing straight into the second SUV. Metal slammed into metal with a horrifying sound. The SUV flung sideways, flipping in the middle of the road, in a rain of sparks and shattered glass. And then hell broke loose. From the high ground, Dominic opened fire, 1 shot at a time, precise and lethal. Every round leaving the barrel meant another of Victor's men dropped. He was not shooting to wound, he was shooting to kill. On the ground, Marcus led the assault team as they surged out from their hiding places. Gunfire echoed off the walls of abandoned warehouses, forming a deadly symphony. Victor's men, well-trained as they were, had been caught off guard and boxed in. They tried to fight back, but it was already too late. Elena sat inside an armored vehicle, parked 200 meters away, where Dominic had ordered her to stay put. She heard the gunshots, the screams, the engines snarling. Each second that passed was a century of torment. She hated sitting here while other people fought for her. She hated this helplessness. Then the vehicle door was yanked open. A strange face appeared, one of Victor's gunmen, who had somehow slipped past the perimeter, his eyes lighting up when he saw Elena. "Bingo," he whispered, raising his gun. Elena did not think. Her hand shot out, clamping his wrist at the exact instant the gun went off, the bullet punching through the roof of the vehicle instead of through her head. She twisted his wrist the way she had learned in a self-defense class the year before, and the gun dropped to the floor. Elena grabbed it and, without hesitation, fired. The bullet tore through his shoulder, sending him pitching backward out of the vehicle with a scream of pain. Her hands shook, her heart hammering as if it would break out of her chest. She had just shot someone. The second time in her life she had held a gun, and the second time she had pulled the trigger. 5 minutes later, the gunfire stopped. The silence after a battle was more frightening than the sound of bullets in flight. Elena stepped out of the vehicle, legs unsteady, staring at a scene that looked like it belonged in a war film. Bodies of Victor's gunmen lay scattered across the road. Vehicles burned. Black smoke rolled upward. The stink of gunpowder and blood made her want to vomit. Marcus ran from vehicle to vehicle, checking each of Victor's men, searching for something. Then he stopped, his face draining of color. He lifted the radio. "Boss, these are only foot soldiers. Victor is not in the convoy." Dominic was climbing down from the warehouse roof when he heard that. He stood in the middle of the battlefield, dark eyes sweeping over the dead and the burning wreckage, and suddenly everything became clear. This was a decoy. Victor had never intended to lead this attack. He had sent his people here to draw Dominic's attention while he was somewhere else. But where? Then Dominic remembered. 18 years ago, a warehouse on the south side, an 18-year-old boy bleeding out, waiting to die, and a stranger who saved his life. Harry had saved Dominic there. And Victor knew that story. He knew what that place meant to Dominic. A warehouse. "He is at the warehouse," Dominic whispered, his eyes darkening. "That is where he wants to end it." The warehouse sat at the corner of Ashland and 27th Street, a red brick building put up in the 1950s, now abandoned and crumbling. 18 years ago, this place had been Dominic Corsetti's hell, the place he ran to with a bullet in his gut and death chasing close behind, the place where Harold Whitmore found him and changed his life forever. Now, it would be where everything ended. Dominic stopped the car 100 meters from the warehouse, killed the lights, and watched. Inside was pitch black, but he knew Victor was waiting. He chose this place on purpose. He wanted to send a message. To remind Dominic that 18 years ago, he could have killed Dominic but chose not to. And tonight, he would correct that mistake. Dominic checked his weapon, chambered around, and stepped out. He did not tell Marcus or anyone else where he was going. This was his fight, between him and Victor. No one else needed to die for it. The warehouse door screeched when Dominic pushed it open. Inside was black as ink, the air thick with dust and rusted metal. He stepped in, each footfall echoing on cracked concrete. Then the lights snapped on. Viktor Volkov stood in the middle of the warehouse, surrounded by 5 elite gunmen with weapons trained straight at Dominic. The Russian Mafia boss looked older than the last time Dominic had seen him. Hair gone white, face carved with wrinkles. But his eyes were the same, cold, ruthless, soulless. "Dominic Corsetti," Victor said, his voice carrying that unmistakable Eastern European edge. "The boy I spared 18 years ago. You finally came." Dominic did not answer with words. He answered with action. 2 shots rang out back to back, 2 of Victor's gunmen dropping before they could even react. Victor barked an order to kill the lights, and darkness swallowed the room. Bullets flew through the black, sparks flashing each time metal struck metal. Dominic moved on instinct, dodging, returning fire, pushing forward. A round grazed his thigh, tearing flesh, but he did not stop. Pain was only background noise. He had lived with that noise for a long time. The remaining 3 gunmen fell within a minute. Then there were only 2 men left, Dominic and Victor, facing each other in the dark. "The boy I spared," Victor repeated, his voice echoing in the empty space. "You did not spare me," Dominic said, his voice cold as steel. "Harry saved me. You were only the man who killed my father." Silence. Then Victor's laugh cracked through the darkness, dry and merciless. "So you know, I have always wondered whether you would find out. Yes, I killed Antonio Corsetti. He was weak. He did not deserve to lead. And you were an 18-year-old boy full of blood and tears. You did not deserve to live either. But I let you live, to see what you could become." Rage flared in Dominic's chest, the fire he had kept caged for 18 years. "You think you made me? No. Harry made me. You only made the enemy who will kill you." They crashed into each other in the dark. No guns, only fists and the will to survive. Victor was still strong despite his age, the streets of Moscow having taught him how to fight with everything he had. They punched and kicked and grappled on cold concrete. Dominic took a blow to the face, blood spilling from his lip. He answered with a punch into Victor's ribs and heard bone give. Then Victor caught Dominic from behind, both arms clamping down like iron. Dominic felt his breath being crushed out of him, his vision starting to blur. "You will die where Harry saved you," Victor whispered into his ear. Poetic, is it not? The warehouse door burst open. Moonlight spilled in, painting the silhouette of a woman in the doorway. "Elena, no!" Dominic tried to shout, but he had no air. She should not be here. She should be running. She should be living. Victor barked at the only gunman still alive, a man slumped wounded in the corner that Dominic had not seen. "Shoot her!" Dominic summoned every last ounce of strength in his body, twisting, turning, wrenching himself free of Victor's hold. He lunged toward Elena at the exact moment a shot cracked, shoved her to the floor, his body covering hers. The bullet slammed into his shoulder, the same side as the stab wound from morning. The pain almost knocked him unconscious. Dominic lay there unable to move, blood spreading across the concrete. Victor stood over him, gun in hand, triumph on his mouth. "It is over," Victor said, aiming at Dominic's head. A gunshot exploded, but Dominic did not feel the bullet. Victor stood there, eyes wide in shock, looking down at his own chest where blood was blooming. Then he fell. Behind him, Elena stood with the gun in her hand, the weapon she had snatched from the floor, her hands shaking but her eyes not. She had shot Viktor Volkov. She had saved Dominic's life. Elena looked down at her hands, at Victor's blood on the floor, at the man now dead because of her bullet. She did not cry. She did not scream. She only stood there in silence, in shock, in a world that had changed forever. Dominic tried to sit up, pain in every movement. He looked at Elena, the woman who had just killed a mafia boss to save him. "You saved my life," he said. Elena looked at him, her eyes empty but her voice steady. "Now we are even." Ambulance sirens tore through the night 15 minutes after Elena's bullet went through Victor's chest. Marcus had called the FBI and emergency medical services the moment he reached the warehouse and saw the scene inside. Viktor Volkov was still breathing, even if only barely. The round had pierced his right lung but missed his heart. He would live, at least long enough to face justice. Paramedics lifted Victor onto a stretcher and wheeled him out to the ambulance under the watch of FBI agents. Agent Mitchell stood there, looking at the Russian Mafia boss with undisguised satisfaction. After so many years, they finally had enough evidence and enough witnesses to put him away for life. Elena sat on an old wooden crate in the corner of the warehouse, arms wrapped around her knees, her empty gaze fixed on nothing. She had not spoken a word since the "now we are even." She had not cried. She only sat there in silence, like a statue left behind. Dominic, his shoulder temporarily bandaged by the medics, walked over and sat down beside her. He did not speak. He only stayed, letting her know she was not alone. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. "I tried to kill someone," Elena said at last, her voice raw, as if she had screamed herself hoarse, even though she had not screamed at all. "He is still alive," Dominic said. "You did not kill him." "I tried to kill him," Elena said, looking at Dominic, her eyes wet but no tears falling. "I aimed for his chest and I pulled the trigger. I wanted him dead. In that moment, I wanted him dead." Dominic was silent. He did not know what to say, because he understood that feeling better than anyone. The first time he killed someone, he had been 18, right here in this warehouse, only hours after Harry saved him. He remembered what it felt like, the disgust, the fear, and somewhere deep inside, a dark sliver of satisfaction he hated himself for feeling. "You saved my life," Dominic said. "You did what you had to do." "That is what scares me," Elena whispered, "that I did what I had to do, and I do not regret it." In the corner, a groan sounded. Victor's last gunman, the one who had shot Dominic, lay there with a bullet in his leg, waiting to be taken out with his boss. He looked at Dominic with terrified eyes. Dominic stood, walked toward him. His hand moved automatically toward the gun at his hip. This man had shot him. This man had almost killed Elena. He deserved to die. Dominic drew his weapon and aimed at the gunman's head. The man squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for death, but it did not come. Dominic stood there, gun in hand, looking down at the man who had hurt him, and he did not pull the trigger. He looked over at Elena. She was watching him, not judging, not afraid, only watching, waiting to see what he would do. Dominic lowered the gun. "I am tired of letting the dead control me," he said, his voice exhausted, but carrying something new, a release. "My father, Victor, all those years of hatred and revenge, it ends here." He turned away and walked off, leaving the FBI to handle the gunman. Elena stood and stepped out of the warehouse into the night. Dominic followed. They stood there in the open lot beneath a sky full of stars neither of them really saw. "I need time," Elena said, calm but firm. "I need to do this alone. The foundation, the healing, all of it." Dominic looked at her, feeling something in his chest he could not name. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I can't build anything new in your shadow." Elena met his eyes, sorrowful but determined. "You saved my life. You protected me. But if I keep leaning on you, I will never know who I truly am. I need to know I can stand on my own." Dominic wanted to argue, to tell her she did not have to be alone, that he would be here, would protect her, would do whatever she needed. But Marcus put a hand on his shoulder, holding him back. "Let her go, boss," Marcus murmured. "She is not running away. She is running toward something." Elena looked at Dominic one last time, then turned and walked away. No looking back, no hesitation. She climbed into the FBI vehicle waiting nearby and disappeared into the night. Dominic remained at the warehouse, alone. This place, where Harry had saved him 18 years ago, where Elena had saved him tonight. He had owed Harry his life, and he had spent 18 years paying that debt back. Now he owed Elena his life too, and this time, he did not know how to repay it. 6 months passed like a dream. The Harry Whitmore Foundation officially began operating in the 2nd month after that fateful night at the warehouse, and since then, it had changed the lives of 800 homeless veterans across Chicago and the surrounding areas. 800 men and women who had once served their country and then been forgotten by it now had roofs over their heads, food on their tables, and a chance to begin again. Elena Reyes sat in the Foundation's small office in the Loop, looking out the window at Chicago streets busy under the late afternoon sun. She had changed a great deal in 6 months, yet some things in her remained the same. She still worked part-time as a nurse at Cook County Hospital 3 days a week, because she did not want to forget what it felt like to care for people with her own hands instead of only with money. She still lived simply in a 1-bedroom apartment on the south side, not far from the place where everything had started. The new apartment was better, with working heat and no roaches, but it was still modest by the standards of someone who had inherited nearly $5 million. Elena did not need luxury. She only needed enough. This morning, before going to the office, she had stopped at the bus stop on Clark Street, the place where, 6 months earlier, every morning she had brought a sandwich to a homeless old man. The place where Harry had sat waiting for her day after day. Not because he needed food, but because he needed to know she was all right. She placed a small bouquet on the sidewalk, right where Harry used to sit. No one slept there anymore. The city had cleaned up the area after Harry's story went public, but to Elena, the spot would always be sacred. "I kept my promise, Harry," she whispered. "Small things are never small." She stood, about to turn away, when she saw a young woman curled up on the opposite corner, maybe 18 or 19, hair tangled, clothes wrinkled, the hollow eyes of someone who had surrendered hope. Elena recognized that look. She had worn that look when she was 16 and wandering these streets. She walked over and sat down beside the girl. She always carried a sandwich in her bag, a habit she had never broken. She held it out. The girl stared at her with suspicion. "Why?" "Because once someone helped me," Elena said. The girl took the sandwich and looked at it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Maybe, for her, it was. "If you need help," Elena said, handing the girl a foundation card. "Call this number. We can help you find a place to stay, and a job." She stood and walked away, but she knew the girl would call, because sometimes a sandwich and a little hope are all a person needs to change a life. That evening, in her small apartment, Elena watched the news. Derek Whitmore had been sentenced to 20 years in prison for second-degree murder, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. He would grow old behind bars, and Elena found she felt neither joy nor sorrow about it, only an ending. Viktor Volkov had been extradited back to Russia after the FBI finished questioning him. There, he would face even more serious charges from the Russian authorities. The one-time mafia kingpin was now only a sick old man with Elena's bullet still lodged in his lung. Elena's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. An anonymous donation to the Harry Whitmore Foundation, $2 million. Elena stared at the message, then looked out the window at the Chicago night sky. She did not need to ask who it was. She knew. 1 week after the anonymous contribution, Elena came home to her apartment after a long day at the foundation office. She was tired but satisfied. The kind of tired that comes from doing something that matters. She turned into the familiar alley that led to her building and stopped short. A familiar black car was parked at the curb, and leaning against it, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, was Dominic Corsetti. He looked different than he had 6 months earlier. Still tall, still sharply cut, but something in his dark eyes had softened. Maybe peace, maybe something else. Elena walked closer and stopped a few steps away. "Normal people just send a text," she said. "I am not normal," Dominic replied, holding out one of the coffees to her. "Black, no sugar," he remembered. Elena took the cup, felt the warmth spread through her palm in the cool autumn night. They stood there in silence for a moment. 2 strangers who had become something more than strangers, though neither of them dared to name it. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "I do not know," Dominic said. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw real uncertainty in his eyes. "For the first time in my life, I do not have a plan." Elena took a sip of coffee and looked up at the Chicago night sky. The stars were faint behind the city's light pollution, but they were still there. Always there. "Harry used to say small things are never small," she said. "Is this a small thing?" Dominic asked. "I do not know yet," Elena said. She looked at him and found herself smiling. Not a big smile, just the smallest curve at the corner of her mouth. But it was real. They stood there in the Chicago autumn night. 2 people from different worlds, carrying scars and debts that might never fully heal. But maybe that was all right. Maybe life was not about being perfectly healed, but about finding someone willing to stand beside you while you were still in pieces. Nothing was certain. Nothing was promised. But for the first time in their lives, both of them understood that some debts were not made to be repaid. They were made to be lived with, and that was enough, at least for now. The story of Elena and Harry, of Dominic and debts left unpaid, reminds us of something simple but profound. Sometimes the smallest kindness can change an entire life. A sandwich, a cup of coffee, a moment of stopping long enough to truly see someone the world has turned away from. We do not need to be wealthy to be kind. We do not need power to make a difference. We only need to be willing to see one another. And what about you? How did this story make you feel? Have you ever met a Harry in your life? Or maybe you are the Elena, trying to be kind even when life is not easy. Share with us in the comments below. We would truly love to hear the stories that come from deep in your heart. If this story moved you, Please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next videos. A like and a share from you will help this story reach more people. Thank you for being here with us. Wishing you and your family strength, a life filled with joy and peace every day. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.